Imagine waking up someday in one of the mansions that Jesus Christ said he was going ahead to prepare for us. You walk out into the New Jerusalem on the streets of gold, turn a corner, and you find yourself face to face with the Son of Sam killer, or perhaps the Milwaukee cannibal Jeffrey Dahmer, or one of the Manson family. Is that possible? Welcome to Skywatch TV. I'm Derek Gilbert. That'll be the topic of our program today as we discuss a book that Defender Publishing calls perhaps the most important book it's ever released. It's called Redeemed, Unredeemable, When America's Most Notorious Criminals Came Face to Face with God. Our guest is the co-author of the book, Donna Howell. Donna, welcome to Skywatch TV.
Thank you.
This is a really compelling read because it really forces us as Christians into places that are uncomfortable for us. We like to think that we share the love of Jesus Christ with people that we meet, and yet this really pushes us even beyond that level of comfort. I mean, it's easy for us to forgive people that we already like and love, but David Berkowitz, Tex Watson. Let's start at the beginning here as to what inspired you to start researching their conversion stories and what it means as far as our faith in God and His mercy. You open the book with a story of a candlelight vigil that took place not far from the Skywatch TV studios in Springfield, Missouri, last February, candlelight vigil. What was that about, and how did that affect you and the Skywatch team, or the Defender Publishing team, rather? What was it that led to the genesis of the book?
Well, the candlelight vigil actually happened in the middle of the research. We were compiling research for the book, and a young girl in Springfield, Missouri was raped and murdered. And we went to the candlelight vigil of that, and several of our staff went. And getting there, leaving, observing everything, we were there for the family. We couldn't talk. Or at one point, there was a song that had broke out near the front of the march. They were singing "This Little Light of Mine," and me and the co-staff that I was with, we did not sing. We couldn't. We was like choking sobs would have been the result of that.
Yeah.
We just continued to march and be in support of the family. About halfway through the march, there was some wild cheering. It was very unusual in that setting. And we looked, and it was everybody had focused on the prosecuting attorney, had been at the front of part of the march, and everybody was, there were signs that they were holding that said things along the lines of, let him hang. There needs to be harsher punishments for crimes against women and children. Execute him, those kinds of things. And everybody was going really, really wild. It was a very emotionally charged place.
So it's a kind of rally that could have gone one way, just a somber gathering of people remembering a 10-year-old girl who her life ended in a brutal way and much too soon. And almost if it had turned the wrong way, a sort of vigilante setting, a mob setting.
It was very vigilante there for a minute, yeah. It was a clashing of so many different emotions at once. We didn't say a word or anything. We left, and on the way home we discussed it and thought, it's very difficult to forgive. It's very difficult to even consider forgiving in that situation. And it's moments like those, and it's events like those that people have to focus. They have to ask, will I or will I not consider this person forgivable or redeemable more than at other times? So the purpose behind this book primarily, it plays into, there's a lot of people that say, because of what I've done, I can't be forgiven. You might be able to, but after what I've done, I can't be forgiven. The book will reach them in ways that a lot of modern contemporary Christian literature will not. And it will also reach those who are looking to forgive and can't get past the hump of answering the question, how do I forgive?
So the vigil took place during the research for the book. And your co-author, Tom Horn, was a pastor for many years. Was this a question, how can God love me? If you only knew what I have done, you would know that God could never love me. Was that something that he had to encounter?
He did, yeah. He was a pastor in one of the largest Christian organizations in the world for 25 years. And that was one of the things that he received. I think, according to what I've heard him say, that is one of the questions he received the most was, it's easy for you to say you can be forgiven, you haven't, but look at what I've done,
So some of the case studies that you include in the book are some of the most notorious criminals of the 20th century in the United States. People who if there was a hierarchy of evil, would be maybe, just at the tier just below Adolf Hitler, for example. Who did you select, and how did you go about communicating and interviewing these people that you include in the book?
The selections of the 7 case studies that we eventually ended up featuring was mostly based on the question, who has been claiming conversion for a very long time? What are the works of their hands? In a couple of cases, they were not, and it was mostly because they're famous. As in the case of Ted Bundy, his case was so famous, and there was so much debate online as to whether or not he was or wasn't. Lots of very, very heated debate and opinions. So the reason that we chose the 7 that we chose was mostly based on the idea that these are the same 7 names that everybody else struggles with, and these are several out of the 7 are the same people that have shown for a very long time, years and years, a good portion of their life now, to do good works with their hands where they are.
Some of the names in here I was not even aware had claimed a conversion experience and claimed to have accepted Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. Ted Bundy, for example. Jeffrey Dahmer, I'd heard rumors, but I did not know that was something he had claimed. Carla Faye Tucker, the so-called pickaxe killer, parent killer, Sean Sellers, 2 members of the Manson family, Tex Watkins and Susan Atkins, was not aware that they had even claimed a conversion. So some of them had kind of dropped off the radar. They had not tried to exploit their notoriety in a way to publicize their ministry. They had really been low-key about it. So how, then, were you able to kind of break through the wall that they had put around themselves, or that had been put around them by the prison system, to find out from them, get their stories?
The criminals, as well as the victims, the remaining family of the victims, and other people associated, as really closely associated with the cases, have very much gone off radar for years and years now. Most of them have. And in the case of David Berkowitz and Tex Watson, there have been thousands of interview invites, and they have turned every one of them down, most of them down, for a good 20 years. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that their names have been so highly exploited. They get an interview invite, and it turns into a serial killer online fan site auction. This guy touched this letter.
Yeah.
We were able to reach out to them with an invite that they had not received, that they even had said that they had never received before, which was, no, we're not defending you. We're not saying that what you did was not bad. We're not watering anything down, nor are we going into the blood and the gore of the crime scene yet again, like so many true crime genre books have done. But that we are actually approaching this from an angle that says, although we are not directly declaring that you are or are not saved or unsaved, we are presenting the evidence of your redemption story. And we're allowing the story to speak for itself. Will you work with us? And every one of them said yes, including the contemporary Christian artist Carmen.
Yes.
He was really well known for some of his music that happened in the earlier 80s. He actually agreed to work with us. And unfortunately, because of some of the chemotherapy issues that he was dealing with in his schedule at the time, we weren't able to connect with him. But we had some really big names, including, like I said, David Berkowitz, Charles Tex Watson. We had Roy Ratcliffe, who is the prison minister who worked to baptize Jeffrey Dahmer. Dr. Dorothy Otnow-Lewis, who was both the psychiatric professional associated with the case of Ted Bundy, as well as Sean Sellers. We just had a lot of people that it had to have been the hand of God, because these people were not responding to anybody else.
Now, Carmen was working with Sean Sellers, correct?
He was the mentor for Sean Sellers, the pastoral mentor for Sean Sellers on death row.
Okay. You mentioned earlier that some people find it difficult to believe that God could accept them. And I want to talk in a minute about how much greater an obstacle it was for some of these people to come to that place. But one of the things that struck me about the book, Redeemed, Unredeemable, is how many of the people who wound up on death row for their horrific crimes had been exposed to Christianity in one form or another as young people. Where did they go wrong? If they'd heard the gospel message, why did they turn out the way they did?
I think it's the same story as many, but I think they just went really far south. There is a certain responsibility that I think that not just that parents, especially parents, hold to really explain the gospel and help them understand from as little as they until they completely can psychologically fully understand the gospel story.
Right.
But in the case of several of these people, they walked down the halls and they saw very unabashedly displayed pictures of, Jesus in Roman times up on a cross. What to them, they later explained, looked just like a big bloody crime scene. And it was, the world's most famous and brutal crime scene, but it's just not connecting with them that there's a reason why it's reverently displayed in a church. You wouldn't go to a church and see the Sharon Tate crime scene on a wall.
Right.
They would consider that inappropriate on so many levels, but they don't explain to a child why, it's very difficult to connect that to a toddler understanding.
How does that scene on the wall translate into the rules for living that I'm giving you when all they see are the rules?
Exactly.
They don't understand the love in between, the need for that crime scene and where we are today. Parents are called to train up our children in the way they should go, and if that explanation is not there, then all they're seeing is this bloodied, broken man, and then a bunch of rules that
Exactly.
From a parent who may just be saying, do it because I said so, or else. And that was seemed to be a common thread, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, maybe I'm reading into it, but it seemed to be a common thread that there was that sense of love and family missing in almost all of these cases in their childhood. And so they went looking for other ways to fill that hole, or perhaps the hole was filled by powers, principalities, rulers of spirit that the Apostle Paul writes about. Is that a fair assessment of the background and perhaps the causes that led to these horrible crimes that they committed?
This book, it actually ended up being so many things that we were not planning for it to be. It was a book about, these 7 stories and stories of redemption. And it has actually in so many ways turned out to also be a book that is calling for parents to really pay attention and connect with their children and their nieces and their nephews and family. The connection for family and depth and relationships is so powerfully embedded and imprinted in every single person from birth, that if they don't receive a connection, a healthy family connection with a parent or a guardian or wherever they can get it, that disconnect is what removes from their psyche their value toward human life, their value towards what for these 7 people eventually became victims. And if a person can't connect with other people and family, they will connect wherever they can find it. And when you don't value your fellow man in these cases, many of them actually turned to Satanism because they became arrogant people that did not connect. They couldn't connect. They had no value system because there was never a value system for them based in humanity around them. They connected with arrogance and me, and it turned into what became the I want this because I want this mentality led to Satanism, which led to anything else that would inflate their own power inside them, and that led to some pretty dark things. But people will find the connection where they can find it. In a lot of places it will become the Anton LaVey or the Book of Satan or the Satanic Bible or whatever that will be, and it was for several of these people.
Or a perverted form of family, as in the Charles Manson family and the group that followed him. So these people basically found their way down to the very depths of human depravity. How did they manage to find their way back? For example, Susan Atkins and Tex Watson, who were members of the Manson family, participated in some of the most brutal crimes of in American history. What was it that led them out of that pit, the abyss, and at least assuming that their stories are true and accurate, what was it that led them back to believing that, for one thing, that they could be loved once they recognized what they had done, and then to accepting that love and then turning and sharing that with others?
To answer that, I will use Tex Watson specifically as an example. He had been he had been led down a road of so much brainwashing in this Manson cult that eventually he did come to realize that there was a connection missing between the Christ that he had followed, Manson, and the true Christ. And he wasn't interested in the true Christ. He wasn't interested in any Christ. He wasn't interested in being anything but Watson for a while after his incarceration. And he spent actually quite a bit of time in a psychiatric ward recovering from a lot of just what absolutely drove him crazy in the brainwashing and getting pulled out of that and learning, oh my gosh, this isn't God. I wasn't serving God. And that took him so far away from anything he had ever believed in that he put a wall up and said, I don't believe in any of it, leave me alone. And some years went by and he started to feel the yearning. He was very, very, very depressed in a dark place, started to pray Psalms 23. And I cannot begin to tell you how many times in the book that specific passage comes up and has such meaning and life for people. But he begins to pray that, and he begins to feel that there is a presence there with him. And it's real, and it's not Manson-like. It is real. That turns into his own yearning to want to know what is out there, and he starts to open his mind up again to the idea that it could be the real Christ. So he starts to pray, and the classic, if you're there, I'm listening, where are you? He had to go through a lot of therapy to get past that. Using him as an example, Tex Watson is only one man in a very, very brainwashed situation that represents every other case in the book. Because even those who are not involved in a cult, and you can read it case after case after case, they go through the very, very same mental breakdown, release of wanting to have anything to do with God, connection with something that they believe is supernaturally powerful that is not the Christian God, the Jesus Christ gospel that you and I are more familiar with, and then eventually they do come around to the higher power of Jesus Christ and the gospel.
Skeptics might look at the case studies here and say, well, of course these people are going to say they accepted Jesus Christ. When you're on death row, you'll say anything to get a break. How would you respond to that?
I believe that there are many people, myself included actually, prior to the research of this book, that want to consider everything that they say as a cop-out jailhouse religion and look for some reason to debunk it. There is so much to be said about the lives that they are living from incarceration and forward. So beginning with the fact that the walls of their cell is a daily reminder of what you've done. Failure, failure, failure. They get up every morning, the walls of their cell, failure, failure. It continues to go on. They don't have a distraction like you and I where we wake up and after a bad day and our guilt is bothering us, we go play Nintendo or turn on the TV or whatever. They are every single day. They're told when to eat, when to shower. They get out. Most of the time in the high security prisoners, like the prisons spoken of in this book, they're only allowed 1 hour out of their cell a day into the sunshine, and sometimes not even that. The really, really high security prisons and death row and life. So you have to keep in mind that, yes, it does seem very quick. It seems very, well, that's convenient for us to look at them and say, you killed somebody and now you're saying, Jesus Christ, where did you come up with that? But they're every single day. The only time that they are given is time to be inside 4 walls, nothing to do. That's where they live. And if there's ever a time where they're going to reflect and they're going to come around and they're going to say, okay, look at what I've done. Look at where I am at because of what I have done. Is there any hope for me? Then it's going to be there. It's going to be in a place where nothing else can distract them but from that reflection. And I will add on to the end of that to say also that I believe that is where God frequently meets people, is when they have nothing else that can pull their attention or distract them from focusing on Him.
Yeah, there's and I know we mentioned this in talking previously, there's a television show that my wife and I watched very regularly about 15 years ago called Millennium, as we were approaching the year 2000. And there was one show that kind of stood apart. It was almost comic. It was 4 demons sitting in a donut shop discussing tactics and strategies for winning souls. And one demon allows us how he doesn't really like working with serial killers. Another one says, well, if they scare you, and no, that's not what I meant at all. They wind up on death row, and that's the only place where people can still find God anymore. And sadly, there is some truth to that. As you were communicating back and forth with the subjects in the book to prepare these case studies, and by the way, it's greatly appreciated that you didn't go into the gore and the details and make this a true crime book. What were your reactions? In other words, how difficult did you find it to say, yes, I believe this is genuine, and I believe that this person responsible for the deaths of is in fact saved, and I will see this person someday in glory?
There were a lot of moments where I doubted in every single one of them. And in every single one of them, this is just my personal opinion. We never say this in the book directly. Eventually, I did come to believe that every single one of them was a legitimate conversion to Christ. Mm-hmm. And I think that it is because when you immerse yourself, and I do not suggest that anybody does, but when you immerse yourself in these stories and in what they've done and in the depth of the evil of the acts that they've committed, and then you finally pull yourself out of that and say, "Phew, that's done. Let's focus on their conversion story." You can see they're completely different people. Susan Atkins, you cannot even recognize the young girl from the mugshot when you look at the more modern of her mugshots, real close to her death. She passed away in 2009. These people, you can't even recognize them. The way that they speak in later interviews, they're not the same people. The things that they say that come out of their mouth, especially in the cases of the Manson, they were so imprinted and brainwashed in all of this. One with they're not even the same people. The tone of their voice is different. Their eyes are different. But it's not just being able to observe the difference in that. It's some of the things that they said and the ways that they approached the subject of, look at what I've done. I mean, it was so transparent. They didn't even try to pull the wool over anybody's eyes there towards the end. It was just, look at what I've done. I have no excuse. I deserve what I'm getting. And by the way, many of them said that. Many of them said, I deserve what I'm getting. The world deserves to see me in this position, and my victims deserved better than I gave them. It's just, and I just can't imagine that you can change that way unless you mean it.
Again, I will say this kind of pushed me into an uncomfortable place. I'm the father of a beautiful young lady who will be 25 years old soon. When she was in elementary school, a young girl, age 6, in a community near us, just outside St. Louis, was found in a culvert. She'd been taken while she was walking to a friend's house and killed. And it struck me that I would have been capable of some horrific things if that had happened to my daughter and I had gotten my hands on the perpetrator. What do you hope readers take away from Redeemed, Unredeemable?
The message of Christ, above and beyond anything else, the message that the reason why he died, that it is for everyone. One of the articles that Raiders recently released was called Letter from a Killer. And I had written it from the perspective that early on in the research of this, when we were first corresponding with these criminals, we received a letter from Tex Watson. And one of the ladies who was working in the mailroom at that time, she found it and was handling it and didn't even look at whose name it was. And then she got it and she looked at it and she started shaking and sweating because, I mean, here's a letter from the man who killed Sharon Tate and the LaBiancas. And she took that and immediately went to Tom, and she came to me and she was like shaking and it was just so surreal. Yeah. And I wrote a recent article for Raiders reflecting that. That is what our human finite minds process. That is what we think. We see a letter from a killer and we go, I got to go wash my hands. It's almost like the blood that they've shed is going to follow them even into an inanimate object that's traveled across the country. Yeah. And so we can't fathom what God has done for who God has done it for. But he did come simply for anyone. He said that. There's no questioning whether or not that Jesus died for everyone. and that there is redemption available for everyone. So that is the central meaning behind the book, and that is the central focus and the central purpose, and that is exactly what Tom and I both hope that anybody that reads it can take with them.
With just about a minute, what was the most surprising thing you learned in the research for Redeemed, Unredeemable? Maybe a detail or maybe a reaction of your own that surprised you?
I think Jeffrey Dahmer was probably the most surprising and the most personal of all the case studies. And when you watch the interviews from when he was first incarcerated and his later interviews, he was never the bad guy, the boogeyman that he really was in front of people. He seemed like such a nice guy. Mm-hmm. And it was very surprising to hear what he was capable of doing, and it was 10,000 times more surprising to read how he came to Christ the way that he did. And the relationship that he made with Roy Ratcliffe was the first normal human connection relationship that he made, and when he made it, what that led to.
That was a story I was very familiar with, living in the area at the time that story broke, and reading the details in the newspaper was chilling enough. That was one of the surprises that I took away from the book, too, because I had no idea. Donna Howell is co-author with Tom Horn of the book Redeemed, Unredeemable, When America's Most Notorious Criminals Came Face to Face with God. Donna, it was an honor and a pleasure meeting you today.
Thank you, Derek.
You can get a copy of Redeemed, Unredeemable at Skywatch TV. Just call the number on your screen or visit skywatchtv.com. Keep watching. We'll do our best to serve as your eyes on the wall. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is Skywatch TV.